Thank you, Alyssa. And good afternoon. It's a smaller crowd than yesterday, but that's okay. So you're rounding third, heading for home, right? So I think 2 more sessions or 1 more session. And I'm going to try and accomplish almost the impossible, which is a 15-minute presentation that took my boss 30 minutes last week to do. So let's move forward. So everyone talks about outcomes. There's a lot of conversation in the industry right now about outcomes. So what is an outcome? Is it a product? Or is it an experience? It kind of depends on who you talk to, right? Do cities buy subway trains or do they buy mass transit systems? Depends on who you're talking to, right? Food. Is it food? Depends on if you're talking to the consumer. If you're talking to the farmer, he probably sees that field and thinks it's a new tractor. But if you're talking to a government agency that's responsible for ensuring food stores are at an optimal level, they see that as national security. So again, it all depends on who you're talking to, what an outcome is. And your customers, they do want a good experience, absolutely, right? So they don't want to have an interaction go south and be upset with the vendor. But overall, ultimately, they want to achieve their expected outcomes. That trumps, the good experience. They'll tolerate a less than optimal experience if they're achieving outcomes that they need. And those outcomes can range from, higher share prices. If you're talking to the C-level executive, that's what they're interested in, right? They want to achieve an outcome that drives the share price up, valuation increases. Other levels of the organization would be interested in accomplishing programs delivered on time, efficiently. Private health agencies or government agencies would be interested in, healthcare outcomes. Entertainment companies, life's more fun. So again, customer success really needs to figure out what customers are trying to do. Now, you don't do it alone, of course. The sales organization does some upfront prep work. They do the initial kind of discovery to figure out what are the goals the customer's trying to achieve. But the onus really is on customer success to take that information and drive the relationship forward iteratively using a collection of data points to support improvements of the progress towards the outcomes. And the end result is that customers will reward companies that do that help them achieve their goals. They'll reward them through loyalty. It's kind of a straight equation that the more effort you put into helping them achieve their outcomes, loyalty is a very powerful kind of end result. And ultimately, that's what you want as a vendor in today's economy, which is transitioning through this massive kind of turmoil. So if you don't do that, you're going to get punished. And I need to just kind of explain this slide a bit. This is research that my boss, Thomas Law, Executive Director of TSIA, came from his latest industry study. And it's almost irrelevant who the company names are because it really is typical of the view that he sees across the industry. SaaS models, on-premise models, small, large, doesn't really matter. There's a real kind of downdraft happening with product revenues right now. And so, it begs the question, why is the whole industry suffering from this right now? And you can say it's because, the simple answer is customers just do not feel loyalty to vendors at this time. They're churning and they're making decisions to just not stay with the platform and to go with a competitor. So that means they're not getting the value they expect. So what we have is a 2x2 model at TSIA that says, the once profitable large legacy model in the upper left is now under extreme pressure and it's being commoditized. And so a lot of the vendors are moving down to the lower left and their products are being ravaged and they're losing money or losing revenue and market share. And they need to figure out how to transform themselves into the XaaS, X as a Service 1.0 world, which we think of typically as someone like Salesforce. Extremely high growth, good valuation, no profits. Okay, so that's 1.0. Everyone needs to move to 2.0, which is subscription economy, X as a service, high profits. Hardly anyone's there right now. In fact, here's the breakout. 60% of the companies in the industry are in the commoditized model right now. They're just being slammed. Their revenues are down, their products' market shares are being eroded. They're having to figure out how to morph themselves into a cloud vendor, really embrace the subscription economy. It's not easy. It requires re-engineering, process, organizational realignment, roles and responsibility, everything. And all the bets are off. We don't know who's going to survive and how many are going to survive. And so it's quite interesting. And so 20% right now in the market is in the 1.0 model, which means to say they are having success in the subscription economy, really well-deployed cloud models. Many of you are in that space, but hardly any profit. There are exceptions, and those are in the top upper right. And so only 10% of the industry right now is really what we would consider the end game of subscription economy with profit. And so, when we think about this very basic metric, churn, we see year over year, and this is from our last baseline survey of about 250 companies. And this is the average we see, that it's a very high, persistently high churn rate. It's really frustrating for companies that they cannot really systematically drive that down. And so it begs the question, why is that? For me, the logical answer is because the customers are not adopting enough of the solution that they realize enough of the value to achieve their expected outcomes. So when I think about CSMs, and this is from the same baseline survey, why aren't they spending more time driving adoption activities, which drives stickiness and higher rates of loyalty? Well, it's because companies expect a lot of customer success. They expect them to not only drive adoption, they expect them to do all the training and education and, by the way, do some reselling or renewing and do some cross-selling when you have the chance. So we're really advising our membership at TSIA to really start doubling down on focusing on adoption, because all the good things will flow from that. And so one of the elements of driving adoption is really the ability to monitor consumption. And this is kind of just standard in our industry. Everyone kind of knows that, but it needs to be said that still not everyone's doing it. And there's all kinds of reasons or explanations people provide for not being able to do it. Nevertheless, that's really just a fundamental trait of good organizations, if they want to really drive adoption, is to be able to measure how well customers are consuming the solution. And yet, even though 72 or 50% said they could monitor remotely, only 37.5 actually have a framework. And by a framework, we mean the ability to consume that data and then systematically infuse processes or inform the processes with the information and have a loop so that you can iteratively improve the engagement model, the delivery, the execution based on the information you're finding. So only roughly a little over a third of companies that we surveyed are actually doing anything systematically with the data. That's not to say they don't do anything. They just do it on an ad hoc basis. So in order to move in that 2x2, companies need to figure out what customers really value, and they need to do that at scale, and they need to deliver that value first before they can ever really gain the trust and establish credibility with the customer to the extent that they'll be expanding their investment and realizing their outcomes. So customer success is really, in a perfect world, built to do this. The inherent kind of behaviors around customer service, the ability to connect the dots, professional communication skills, being unafraid and not overwhelmed by data, multitasking, and of course the ability to see into the future where this customer needs to go and how should we get them there. So what are the unique traits of customer success that allow them to kind of lead this world of outcome-based engagement models? So when I think of customer success, there's no other organization in a company that has the privilege of close proximity to customers. Organizationally, they're the ones that have this mandate to be adjacent to the customer community, and they have this kind of license to have access to information about the customer. And customer success should really be exploiting that adjacency. They're responsible for driving adoption and ensuring customers stay on the platform. They're proactive. Again, this is a perfect world. We obviously aren't perfect at this, but this is what customer success organizations should really strive to do. They need to be process-driven, data-driven. They should look at the customer very holistically from a journey point of view and be able to determine or help build processes that manage the customer seamlessly and kind of frictionlessly through that journey. And they're good herders. They're good at marshaling the right resources at the right time for the right reason to move the customer forward. And finally, they really kind of inherently desire to help the customer grow in capability and the ability to accomplish more. So back to our baseline survey, we asked the survey takers, select from a drop-down list, what are the activities your team is focused on, your CSMs are focused on, and this is kind of the breakout, and it's just basically a laundry list. Many of you are kind of familiar with all these activities. But what's troubling for us is that the top one is get well plans. By itself, I don't really like that being at the top anyways. It suggests a kind of reactive kind of behavior. But what's even more troubling is that 25% of the respondents in the survey do not use predictive analytics. Oh, sorry, they do use predictive analytics. So 75% of the companies do not. So it begs the question, how are they determining the accounts at risk systematically if they don't do predictive analytics? And then if I think about the foundation around adoption frameworks, customer benchmarking is an important part of it. You need to be able to kind of baseline your ideal customers and be able to kind of measure people against that. And only 25.6% of companies are actually doing benchmarking. So what's next? What you see on the screen is what we call the TSIA's customer success lifecycle criteria. And so these are the categories we believe a best-in-class customer success organization should be striving to excel at. It covers pretty much the gamut of everything, strategy and capabilities and roles and responsibilities and practices that customer success organizations on a big scale should be able to achieve. But we're saying now that at this point in time, customer success organizations should really focus on driving adoption, which is 3.0 on the screen. Those behaviors, those activities will produce the best outcomes for you and your customers. Okay, so how do you drive outcomes? You basically build out a value realization journey map, and we have material that walks through this thing. So you listen to your customers, and you build profiles of customers based on where they are now and where they need to be. And then you systematically build steps that allow you to move them to the next stage. And here's a visual depiction of kind of the journey. So you would just determine what steps are required to move a customer from stage 1 to stage 2 to stage 3. And these would be profiles, so you could actually scale this out. So we call this outcome engineering. And at scale, you need to have the right framework, the right outcomes for the right customer with the right tools. And here's what's going to be shown at our conference in the first week of May. We're going to have a lot of sessions on our framework around building out methodologies for producing outcomes. So it's what's the outcome? What's the financial impact? What are the KPIs? What practices? What technology is involved? And what are the capabilities? And then I'm going to leave you with this. I've got 1 minute left, so I'm doing pretty well. So the outcomes really are dependent on the perspective. And you can still build profiles based on different perspectives. So you just really need to understand your market and then categorize your customers and sort them accordingly. And then you can kind of build processes that drive at scale the right kind of outcomes. The pressure's on to precisely understand the customer and to deliver those outcomes at scale. So you need to be able to utilize technology to really identify the right signals, correlate that information, and then drive the right processes. And customer success is the best organization equipped to do this because, again, the proximity that they have with customers. But the trick is they need to be able to focus. We really believe, as we scan the industry, that there's just too much dilution of effort, and adoption is really the number one requirement right now. And so there's a structure and a methodology required to make it all happen. And if you need to learn more, if you'd like to learn more, please visit our website, tsia.com. And if you're coming to our conference in the first week of May, I'd be happy to speak to you there. But there's going to be a lot of content really building out these capabilities. And I finished exactly on time. Thanks very much.